School librarians face a tidal wave of information thanks to new technologies. This flood of information creates challenges for school librarians seeking to honor the values of librarianship identified by Gorman. With increasing access to information, we have gone from this to this. But school librarians can ride the wave of information by addressing three critical challenges: honoring the value of literacy and learning, protecting students' intellectual freedom and equity of access, and promoting and sustaining the practice of school librarianship. These challenges are not the only ones school librarians face, of course. Student privacy, for example, is important, but it is regulated by school, district, and federal guidelines, including laws like FERPA, and presents a less critical challenge. We'll look at each critical challenge, then a plan to address them. How do we honor the value of literacy and learning while facing a flood of information that changes the very definition of literacy, as well as the ways in which our students access information? As Preddy notes, students have faster access to more information than ever before, and as Cook and Kaplan, Hansen, and Donovan note, some of this information is not reliable. Literacy and learning skills across technologies are a life buoy in a tidal wave of information. The American Library Association tells us that to be information literate, a person must be able to recognize when information is needed and have the ability to locate, evaluate, and use effectively the needed information. Research shows that students are not entering college with the foundational literacy skills necessary to succeed. Because of the diverse technologies available, school librarians cannot focus solely on reading literacy, but must be prepared to teach a variety of information literacy skills, including reading, digital and technology literacy, data literacy, global literacy, media literacy, visual literacy, making and creating, and participative practice and cognitive agility. As Buffy Hamilton explains, literacy is a commodity to procure power as well as a lifelong process, and we must provide students with access. Dando and Cunningham and Rosenblatt remind us that we must honor literacy across technological platforms, which have in turn made school libraries more accessible thanks to 24-hour online access. As Shapiro notes, such access creates opportunities for librarians to teach literacy skills to a broader audience. School librarians face a critical challenge in honoring literacy and learning in a flood of information. Let's consider the second critical challenge. How do we protect students' intellectual freedom and equity of access in the environment created by a flood of information? Cultural competence and diversity and inclusion skills are a life buoy in a flood of information. Students' broadened access to information in a polarized culture creates the risk that people may find content objectionable or offensive and seek to restrict students' access. Restrictions may arise from school board political agendas, school district-imposed internet filters, or parent challenges to materials. But, as Preddy notes, such restrictions make promoting multiple literacies more challenging because students who do not have freedom to explore a range of accessible materials cannot fully develop literacy skills. Seroff cautions that school librarians must be culturally competent to protect intellectual freedom and equity of access, and they must be competent in multiple areas. Morlon argues that school librarians have a moral imperative to purchase, provide, and present an authentic and accurate children's and young adult literature. Every student should have the opportunity to see herself in a book and to learn about others unlike her. Stripling mentions that competent collection development balances print and electronic resources and accommodates a wide variety of reading levels as well. School librarians must provide inclusive programming that serves not just a hypothetical typical student, but all students, including those with different abilities, minorities, those who are homeless, and those facing poverty or living in hard-to-access rural areas. Protecting intellectual freedom and equity of access requires thoughtful policy development on issues including library hours, filtering, imposition of fines, circulation restrictions, materials challenges, appropriate use of technology and social media, and even how the school catalog is selected and used, since, as Weigand points out, traditional resources like the Dewey Decimal System contain implicit biases. Students need an environment that is not just physically accessible, but also warm and welcoming. Finally, as the ALA reminds us, protecting intellectual freedom and equity of access requires school librarians to confront their personal biases and use of language. School librarians should be familiar with diversity standards such as those for academic librarians and with tools like the Harvard Implicit Bias Test. School librarians should also be comfortable with communicating with and about people with different abilities in a way that puts the person first, as outlined by the CDC. School librarians face a critical challenge with protecting students' intellectual freedom and equity of access in a flood of information. Let's turn to our final challenge. How do we promote and sustain the practice of school librarianship when a flood of information creates the appearance of unlimited access to needed information? Advocacy skills are a life buoy in a flood of information. As Stripling and Bringleson both urge, we must be advocates for school librarianship and demonstrate how school librarians provide students with critical literacy skills and competencies for lifelong learning by protecting their intellectual freedom and equity of access. This challenge arises in a time of reduced positions, shrinking budgets, but undiminished importance. School librarians must articulate what they do to an administration and other teachers who may not understand. School librarians must rally partners and allies, including students, volunteers, parents, and community members to speak up for school libraries. School librarians must participate in decision-making. Cunningham and Rosenblatt encourage us to enter the arena of confrontation where institutional priorities are weighed and decisions are made about allocating limited resources. Now that we understand the three critical challenges posed by a flood of information, let's discuss how to ride the wave and meet the challenges. School librarians must pursue specialized training. Researchers Branch Mueller and DeGroot and author Gorman advise that we cannot overlook the importance of obtaining a Master of Library and Information Science or equivalent degree. But we cannot stop there. As Mackey, Spear, and others exhort us, school librarians must model lifelong learning. To do so, we can join professional organizations, even while in graduate school. National organizations like the ALA and the American Association of School Librarians, state organizations, and even local professional learning communities through programs like Google Educator provide opportunities for school librarians to network and learn. Through these organizations, school librarians can join committees and roundtables. School librarians should also regularly attend conferences, seminars, trainings, and webinars. Ioni and Dalton and Villegran specifically recommend trainings on implicit bias. School librarians should read to stay informed on emerging technologies and literacies. We are librarians, after all. Volume 44, Issue 5 of Knowledge Quest, What Makes a Literacy, is a great resource for honoring the value of literacy and learning. For protecting students' intellectual freedom and equity of access, I commend to you Volume 44, Issue 1 of Knowledge Quest, the book for white folks who teach in the hood, and the plethora of ALA resources recommended by Bringleson, Garner, Maggi, and Peckel. School librarians should regularly use online resources for learning and planning. In addition to the ALA, AASL, and state organization websites, I recommend these sites, especially Common Sense Education and the News Literacy Project. It is not enough to join organizations, read, and keep up online. We must collaborate with colleagues. Crary admonishes that we do not have to start big, just start somewhere, and we must form and nourish relationships with those in our school communities. As Stripling advises, by establishing connections with parents, other educators, administrators, students, the school board, and community leaders, school librarians weave a collaborative network of influence that leads to actions and real change. By taking these steps, school librarians can ride the wave of information to honor the value of literacy and learning, protect students' intellectual freedom and equity of access, and promote and sustain school librarianship. Let's do it together.